In this video, we're going to talk about functions in Python, and we will learn how to create functions, how to call them, and we're going to talk about arbitrary arguments and arbitrary keyword arguments. If you want to learn more about Python and other programming languages, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and if you enjoyed this video, please like it. So, what is a function? A function is a block of code that runs when it is called, okay? And you can pass data, which are known as parameters or arguments, into a function. And a function can actually is optional. It can return or not return a data, okay? We're gonna talk about both of them in this video, okay? So now let's talk about creating a function. You can actually create a function by using def keyword. Let me write it here, def. This is actually the way you create a function, and now you need to specify the name of your function. For example, my first function, this is the name of my function, and you need to use colon here, okay? And if you hit enter, this block of code, this will actually way in here with this indentation, you can write whatever you want inside this function. For example, this is a simple function and I want to just print hello world, okay, and that's it. This is my function and I want to run this function, okay. If I execute this code, okay, here we have invalid syntax. Well, oh, I forgot to tell you, you need parentheses here. Don't forget to put parentheses after the name of your function, okay. And if I run it again, this is actually defined. Now if I for example want to call this function, I just need to use its name, okay, and it will be called, okay. For example, here my first function, okay, and you need to put parentheses after the name of the function even if there is no parameter, okay. And if I run it, you see hello world is here and this block actually is executed, okay. For example, I can add another print here, like for example, this is my first function, and if I run it again, okay, it is defined. And if I run this line again, you see this line is added because we have two print here and this function is called and it actually printed these two lines. So as I told you, we can pass information into the function by using arguments, and arguments are actually specified after the name of the function inside those parentheses. So, and you can separate those arguments by comma, and you can use as many arguments as you want. I'll show you by example what I mean by this concept. For example, here I want to define a function. We use the def keyword and the name of my function, my for example sum function, function, okay. And I want to pass two parameters, for example a and b, actually my two numbers, and don't forget to put a colon here. And in here I want to calculate summation of two numbers, result equals to a actually plus b, and I want to print the result here, sum colon, and I want to pass results. So if I run it, okay, my function is now defined and I want to call my function, okay, function. Before I show you the result here, I want to show you another thing, and I want to run it like this without passing parameter. And if I run it, here we face an error. My sum function takes exactly two arguments. You should bear in mind that when you define a function with two parameters or three parameters, you have to call that function by passing those parameters, exactly those parameters. And you have to also bear in mind that the order of the parameters are important. And if I, for example, pass here 2 and 3, a will be equal to 2 and b is equal to 3. Okay, if I run it, you see the summation, but here if I actually print each parameter, for example I print A here and print B, okay, if I run it, now run this one, you see A equals to 2 and B equals to 3. Okay, so the order of the actually parameters is important. And if I, for example, add another parameter like 6, and if I run it, you see here another error. 3 is given, 3 parameters, and actually it takes exactly 2 parameters. So be careful about the number of parameters. Now let's talk about arbitrary arguments. Sometimes you do not know how many arguments actually will be passed into your function. Okay, and in this situation you need to use star before the name of the parameter. Okay, inside the parentheses before the name of the parameter you use star, and this way you can pass as many arguments as you want, and those actually arguments will be assigned to actually the variable that is passed into the function, and it is considered as a tuple. Okay, I'll tell you what I mean by this. For example, here I use just one parameter and I want to use star before its name. Okay, and here I want to add another cell here, and let me call the function my sum function. Okay, and I want to pass for example 2 arguments, 2 and 3. Okay, so as you see here we face an error because in here b is not defined, so because we did not pass b here. So how we can fix this error? Actually, as I said, a is now a tuple, so I just need to use a and put 0 inside square bracket and plus, for example, a, and use another square brackets and pass 1 as index, and in here I just need to print a with index 0 and a with index 1, and okay, and if I run the function and here run this line, you see here it is fixed and the summation of these two numbers are calculated, actually is calculated. As you see here, and this way you can pass as many arguments as you want, and a in here the parameter is actually defined as a tuple. Now I'm gonna talk about keyword arguments. You can also send arguments by using their keys, and this way the order of the parameters that you actually want to pass into the function actually is not important. Let me show you by example. For example, in here, if I write the name of the function and call the function, if I pass the parameters, for example 2 and 3, as we talked about, the order of the parameter is important, okay, as you see here, but sometimes you do not know the order of the parameter and you just need to pass them and you do not actually care about the order. This way you can use actually the key and the value. Okay, so let me show you by example. For example, in here I used number 2 equals to, for example, 5, and number 1 equals to 6. This way, as you see, I pass number 2 first and then number 1. Okay, and in here if I run it, you see number 1 is equal to 6 and number 2 is equal to 5, although 5 is actually passed first and 6 is passed second, because I actually specified the name of the parameter, so the order of the parameter is not important this way. We talked about arbitrary arguments, and we saw that we can actually send as many arguments as we want, even though we do not know the exact number of parameters. Okay, and we use star before the name of the actual parameter, but we can also use arbitrary keyword arguments, and we can use 2 stars before the name of the variable, and that variable will be considered as a dictionary, and this way the key of the parameters will be passed with actually the values. So let's see what I mean by arbitrary keyword arguments. in here I just need to write number and put 2 stars before the name of the variable, the name of the parameter here. And if I want to, for example, pass 2 numbers, as you see, number 1 and number 2, okay, and in here it is a, since it is a dictionary, I have to actually treat that variable as a dictionary, and I just need to write number, and inside the square brackets I have to specify the keyword number 1, okay, and I have to add number 2 in here plus number 2, okay, and in here I just need to use these square brackets, okay, and number 2. Okay, if I run this and if I run it again, you see that the actually output is the same. As I said, function can return a value, and this time I want to return the summation of 2 numbers instead of printing that actually summation inside that function. So I delete this line and we use return keyword, and actually beside return I have to pass the variable that I want to return. For example, in here I want to return results. Okay, I run this, and in here I have to assign actually this function into a variable. Okay, here I, for example, write sum equals to, now this function, when I write this function and it actually returns something, that result will be assigned to this variable. And if I print this variable, print sum, okay, actually as you see here, this 11 is the result of actually this summation. If I, for example, delete these 2 lines, okay, and if I run it again, you see 11 is here because this print is actually printing the summation of these 2 numbers, and it is 11. Okay, sometimes you want to define a function that has a parameter, for example, and you it is optional that you pass a parameter or not. Okay, for example, in here let me define a function. For example, my function, and it actually has a parameter like number, and it actually gets a number and it will print that number. Okay, in here let me use parentheses. Okay, and if I, for example, define if I call this function in here, my function, and I want to pass a parameter like 6 in here, okay, and if I actually delete this line, so if I run it, we face an error because of the name of the function. So let me run it again, and now that's true. Okay, this is actually our function, and for example, sometimes I want to define that function without passing a parameter, although here we have a parameter. Okay, we use default parameter value, and if I, for example, say this number equals to, for example, 5, or let me say 0, okay, here 0 is the default value of this parameter. It means that if I call this function without passing any parameter, this number equals to 0 and 0 will be printed. Okay, here I pass 6, and if I for example run this, and if I run this one, you see 6 is printed. And if I, for example, write my function and I pass nothing, if I run it, you see 0 is returned because the default value of number is 0, and that 0 is printed. Okay, this is the concept of default parameters. As you see, until now I just passed a number into a function. Okay, you can pass any data type into the function. You can also define a list and pass a list into the function, and you can treat that parameter as a list, and nothing changed. Okay, let me give you an example here. For example, we have some fruits here, and I want to pass fruits to actually a function, and that fruits is a list, for example. And I define a list here. This is a list of some fruits, and I want to pass this list to that function. Okay, here it receives, for example, fruits. I write, for example, my parameter. This is the name of my parameter here, and I want to pass this list fruits. Okay, and now in here I want to print my parameter. I want to show you that my parameter here is the list that I passed here. Let me run it here, and if I run this one, you see this actually list is printed because fruits is passed to this function, and my parameter is now equal to these actually items and actually that list, and that list is printed by printing that parameter. Sometimes you define a function and that function want to be empty. As we talked about this concept, a pass statement in conditions and in loops. In actually functions, we also have that concept. And if you want to, for example, define a function without defining any block of code inside that function, you can use pass statement. If I forget to use pass and I define that function without writing any code inside that block, if I execute it, you see here expected and indented block. It means that you have to write something inside that function. But for example, I want that to be empty. I just need to pass, and if I run it, nothing actually happened. There is no error. And if I, for example, call this function, okay, and here you see nothing changed, nothing happened, no error, because here we use pass statement. Okay, here is the end of this session. I hope it was useful for you, and I believe now you know basic concept of the function and whatever you want, whatever you need to define a function and use functions in your coding. If you want to learn more about Python and other programming languages, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And if you enjoyed this video, please like it. It will be a great support. If you have any questions, leave comments. I'll reach you as soon as possible. Bye for now.